The Law and You, a look at laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines which affect our daily lives. The Law and You, presented by lawyer panel P.R Campbell QC and brought to you on SVG-TV as a public service.
Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, boys and girls, greetings. Welcome to another presentation in this public service nation building series, The Law and You, now in its 24th year. This is program number 981, coming to you on Monday the 24th of August, 2020. On this program, I will speak to you on the topic deed polls. But before getting into the topic, a few brief preliminary comments, beginning as usual with expressions of condolence to the families, all families, which have suffered recent bereavements. And in particular, the family of the late Brother Evans Bernard John, popularly known as E.B. I have known him since his grammar school days, and then later on in life when I was appointed Minister of Information, among other portfolios. I became responsible for the affairs of the National Broadcasting Corporation. I was instrumental in recommending him for an acting appointment as manager in September 1987, the very year I was appointed. And then 2 years later, I recommended him for full appointment as manager. And he served as manager of the radio station until long after I had demitted office. E.B. was a professional broadcaster to the core. In fact, he was among the best. He had a command of the language and a presence on the radio station, which not everybody on radio has. E.B. was a national institution, and he happened to have functioned at the time when there were other stalwarts at the national radio station. I also knew E.B. socially, in that one of my brothers, B.T. Maxman Sr., former superintendent of prisons, was one of E.B.'s best friends. In fact, I think E.B. was the godfather of B.T.'s daughter, Monel. And we therefore met up with E.B. when we had family occasions. He's always so full of life, so full of joy, and with a ready wit. For those who don't know or who have forgotten, E.B. dabbled in the world of calypso and came up with a hit called Handbag. Those remember Handbag? She this and that in she handbag, which was extremely popular. Haven't heard it for a long time, but E.B.'s Handbag, I'm sure, would be played on the station these days to remind people of the breadth and variety of his talents. I give my condolences to his immediate family, his siblings, and all his other relatives and friends. We have lost a good nation builder. Secondly, let us remember and commiserate with those persons adversely affected by the passage of the storm and the hurricane. I refer to the BVI, Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, Haiti, Cuba, even Jamaica got a lot of rain from the system. And the storms and hurricane are now heading towards the southern coast of the United States. They are pointing at Louisiana, but it is also possible that the states of Texas and Florida would be adversely affected. Let us lift all of those persons in our prayers. And as the hurricane season is not yet over, let us pray that the good Lord would keep us in these paths safe. And finally, for preliminaries, the Democratic Convention is now over and the Republican Convention has begun today. You know, when candidate Trump burst on the scene, I said so on this program. I told some of my closest friends to watch out. I said, that fellow could win the presidency. At the time, everybody thought, oh, Mrs. Clinton is going to walk over him. He hasn't got a chance. But knowing what little I know about American society, I told my friends, listen, the man has celebrity status and he has money. And once you have a combination of celebrity status and money, anything can happen in the United States of America. So said, so done. Now, after nearly 4 years of being President of the United States, the whole of America should see what sort of President Trump has been. And if America puts back Mr. Trump in office, America would fully deserve all that they get from a second-term Trump. That's all I have to say. They have in Biden and Ms. Harris a wonderful ticket. I was enthralled by the Democratic Convention, all the speeches, but they have to go out and win an election, which means they have to make sure their people are registered and that they turn out to vote. So let us look and see. I will have a little more to say, but I think I would leave that till next week, Davy, because these preliminaries have already been reasonably lengthy about the United States of America. So let me get ready to go into the topic for the evening, deed polls. Excuse me. In a nutshell, a deed poll is a document by which a person changes his or her name or changes the name of a child. But I don't want to dwell or to get into the intricacies of changing a child's name on this program. Suffice it to say that in the same way that an adult can change his or her name, given certain circumstances, an adult can also effect the change of name of a child, subject to certain conditions, permission from those who are responsible or those parents of the child and so forth. But let us deal with adults. You have to be 18 and over before you can execute a deed poll. The process in St. Vincent and the Grenadines is relatively simple and straightforward. You want to change your name, you go to a lawyer. I want to stress that because whereas for certain legal transactions, you would hear me say from time to time, well, you're not bound to have a lawyer to do this or that, although it's preferable if you do have a lawyer. For a deed poll, you really ought to go to see a lawyer. It's not something you should attempt to do on your own or to do by a goatskin lawyer, to use that colloquial expression. When in the course of my law studies, long ago, first came across the legal principle that you don't have the right to the name you have, I was a bit astonished. I said, so you mean somebody could take your name and you can't do anything about it? Well, that is so. The name you have may belong to you, but anybody can go and sign and register a deed poll taking your name, and there is nothing you could do about it. You could publish notices in the paper saying, well, so-and-so is now carrying the same name, but you be careful in any transaction you have with so-and-so. But one thing you can do, you can't go to court to prevent somebody carrying your name, taking your name. The way the law puts it, you do not have any property in your name. And this was established and reaffirmed a few decades ago by the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council on an appeal arising in St. Lucia. Someone in St. Lucia sought to register a deed poll in the name of a famous family. And the family went to court and said, look, that person is not entitled to use this name because this is the name of one of our family members, a fairly prominent person. And the court said, sorry, there is nothing that can be done. You can't stop a person taking your name legally. So if there is anybody who wants to go by the name Parnell Randolph Campbell, I can't stop the person taking my name. You may ask, well, how can that be done? Would that not create confusion? So be it, but it's one of these things. The law says you don't have the exclusive right to your name. In other words, you don't have copyright in your name. The question arises, why would somebody want to change their name? Well, there are many circumstances in which a person might find it necessary or appropriate to have a change of name. For one thing, you may not like the way your name is spelt on your birth certificate. If you can demonstrate that the spelling on your birth certificate is a mere error, there's a procedure by which you can apply to the registrar to have the error corrected. But you have to show that this is purely a spelling error. As if a name is spelled CEI rather than CIE or something like that. But unless you can demonstrate that an error is purely a spelling error, which is called a typographical error, to effect a change in a name which is already registered on a birth certificate, you have to take out a deed poll. Before I go further, I want to read you what a typical deed poll says, and then I'll come back to the narrative. And when I say register, I mean register at the registry at the courthouse. In fact, deed polls are registered in the same books in which deeds for land and property are registered. And when you take out the deed poll, it gets a registration number, just like a deed for property. And anybody can go and get a copy of it. You can get as many copies as you're willing to pay for once it is registered. I have in my hand a copy of a registered deed poll, but what I have done, I have changed the names of the person to protect the person's identity, and I will also quote to you a made-up number, because the one I have is number 95 of 20. I wouldn't give you the year. So let us call this number 495 of 2010. It says at the top, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Then on the line below, deed poll. And this is what the document says. Now in this document, I have used the made-up names Estelle Mabel Williams as the existing name a person had, and the Estelle Mabel Joseph as the new name. So all that this deed poll that did was to change the surname of the person. But you can change the first name, the middle name, or names, as well as you can change just the surname. You can simply change the spelling. For example, I have spelled this M-A-B-E-L, but there's nothing to stop you. If your name is M-A-B-E-L, and you want to spell it M-A-B-L-E, you can go ahead and do that. So this is what a deed poll says, typically. Quote, by this deed, which is intended to be registered in the registry of the state of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, I, the undersigned, Estelle Mabel Joseph of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but presently residing in Brooklyn, New York, in the United States, formerly called Estelle Mabel Williams, a Vincentian by birth, born on the 5th day of August, 19 blank. Do hereby 1. For and on behalf of myself, wholly renounce, relinquish, and abandon the use of my former name, Estelle Mabel Williams, and in place thereof, I do assume from the date hereof the name Estelle Mabel Joseph, so that I may be called, known, and distinguished not by my former name of Estelle Mabel Williams, but by my assumed name of Estelle Mabel Joseph. Now, this is meant to be a fictitious name. If by coincidence it refers to anybody, you know anybody by these names, please give the person my apologies. I just made the names up. In fact, I did a changeover from the names that were actually on this document, so that if there's a living person called Estelle Mabel Joseph, this is not meant to refer to that person. 2. For the purpose of evidencing such my determination, declare that I shall at all times hereafter, in all records, deeds, and writings, and in all proceedings, dealings, and transactions, as well as private as public, and upon all occasions whatsoever, use and sign the name Estelle Mabel Joseph as my new name, in place of and in substitution for my former name of Estelle Mabel Williams. 3. I expressly authorize and request all persons at all times hereafter to designate and address me by such assumed name, Estelle Mabel Joseph, accordingly. In witness whereof, I have hereunto subscribed my former name of Estelle Mabel Williams and my adopted name of Estelle Mabel Joseph, and affix my seal this blank day of blank 20 blank. Signed, sealed, and delivered by Estelle Mabel Joseph, formerly known as Estelle Mabel Williams. This blank day of blank 20 blank. And the person signs both names. Now, one of the things that must be done when you go to register a deed poll, you have to take with you an original copy of your birth certificate. That is affixed to the deed poll so that anyone doing a search, and the public is entitled to search, can see the particulars of your original birth. Now, you cannot change what is on a birth certificate, except if, say, a father's name is put in the birth certificate of an illegitimate child, then a notation can be done. Something can be put off there, but you can't change up something that is on a birth certificate. The registrar can make a note of a change, but you cannot scratch out something and put in something else, whether date, age, address, or whatsoever. Now, once you register that deed poll, assuming a new name, you are legally bound to carry and use that name alone. So, where you have, as an adult, documents in your first name, your original name, the one you used to have, passport, bank statement, license documents, insurance documents, and so on. You can attach the new deed poll to those original documents to show that the new name refers to the person whose name was originally there. But you cannot go and scratch out names and change and write over a name. There are other complications potentially with a deed poll, but these are things you must ask about if you have occasion to go to see a lawyer to have a deed poll done to change your name. And the process is not very expensive. The registration charges are under $50. The Bar Association scale of fees has, I think, $750 as the new legal fee for the preparation of a deed poll. But it is not something to fool around with. You really ought to have a good reason for wanting to change your name. As I said, you don't like the spelling, or you don't like the name itself, or it could be that when you were born, you were given one name, which is written on your birth certificate, and growing up, they call you by another name. And then when you go to take out a birth certificate in the name that you're accustomed to be called, you find that your real name is something else. And you have been called the new name for so many years, you want to keep it. You use a deed poll to do that, so that you continue to use the name you're accustomed to in place of the one on your actual birth certificate. In my case, that was done. When I was born, my name on my birth certificate was Parnell, but growing up in school in Barley, somehow my name was registered as Pernell, P-E-R. So that even now, when I go to Barley, people refer to me as Pernell. But outside Barley, people know me as Parnell, because Parnell is what is on my real birth certificate and is what I had to carry when I went into grammar school. I'll give you one other instance where a person might feel obliged to change their name officially. And I will use my family circumstance. I hope my brother Bree doesn't mind. My mother and father were not married. My mother was a king, my father Campbell. Brennan came to live in town with my mother. I remained in Barley. So he did the rest of his primary schooling in town. But when they took out his birth paper, of course, my mother's name alone was on the birth paper. In those days, fathers' names couldn't go on the birth paper if they were not married to the mother. So he was registered as Brennan King. When he came to get married, he was told he had to marry in King, even though he had been accustomed to being known as Brennan Campbell. So that is why you refer to Captain King and his family as the Kings. But when I came to go to the grammar school and they wanted to register me in King, I rebelled. Said, no, all through my Barley days, I'm known as Campbell. And all of a sudden, I'm going to be King. Who knows? Parnell King. So they went to a lawyer and fixed up papers so that I could carry Campbell as my surname. So that is why me and Brennan, children of the same man, the same woman, he carries King, I carry Campbell. Now, what he could have done if he had known, but he was too young to know these things, if he had known what is what, he could have gone to a lawyer before he got married and taken out a deed poll to continue to carry Campbell. But birth certificate said King. King was it. And now it's not even King, it's Kingdom. Night breeze. All right. So that is all from this program of The Law and You. Program number 981. I look forward to being a further service to you next week, Monday TV, for another presentation in this public service nation building series, The Law and You. Do have a pleasant week, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, boys and girls, and may the good Lord continue to bless us all.
The Law and You, a look at laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines which affect our daily lives. The Law and You, presented by lawyer panel P.R Campbell QC and brought to you on SVG-TV as a public service.